Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system. The customary quote: the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. From the former First Lady of the United States and human rights activist Eleanor Roosevelt. A brief review of the last part, where we discussed the concepts of the aggressive rook position, attacking versus defending minor pieces, and the collective advance with illustrations and explanations given by Nimzowitsch. So now, moving further into the book, Nimzowitsch discusses regarding the materialization of file or rank with the heading Materialization of the abstract conception of file or rank. An important difference between operations in a file in the middle and endgame. Nimzowitsch writes, a curious and by no means obvious difference must now be noted. In the middle game, the exploitation of a file involves the expenditure of a great deal of energy. In other words, is wholly active. We have only to remember the complicated apparatus used. For instance, in particular, the outpost knight. In the end game, on the other hand, such operations run on simple lines, are in fact of the meditative order. Far and near, not a trace of a knight outpost. The lucky possessor of the file takes their time. At the most, they send forward a handful of men to clean up some position for their advancing rook. And so we can say that operations in a file are in the middle game active, in the end game meditative, contemplative, if you will. And the same applies to a rank. We will illustrate this by some examples. The first example is from a game between Aron Nimzowitsch versus Egil Jacobsen. Egil Jacobsen was a Danish chess master who played during the early 20th century. The game was played in 1923 in the Copenhagen tournament in Copenhagen, Denmark. Unfortunately, Jacobsen passed away the same year at the age of 25 due to an adverse medical condition. Nimzowitsch writes, in the position on board, white holds the clear fifth rank, and by the following simple series of moves manages to materialize the rather abstract effect of his position of this rank. That is to say, to condense it to a concrete point. The game proceeded rook c6 check, king d7, h takes on g6, h takes on g6, knight takes on e6, f takes on e6, and rook c5, followed by rook g5 and f4. The occupation of the point g5 is decisive, the more so since the passive black rook will be forced by sympathy to the move rook g7. Another example is furnished in my endgame against Alan Nelson. Here scarcely a thing took place. At most, the white h-pawn made a gesture of wishing to advance, and yet the white rook succeeded in penetrating to the 8th rank. The endgame referred by Nimzowitsch here was covered in part 16 of this video series, so you can roll back to that part if you would like to go through this particular illustration again. Nimzowitsch continues. The course of the game in the following position is also typical. In the position on board, White calmly goes for a walk. b4, a5, b5, a4, b6, and finally rook c7. If this threat be parried by b6 by black, then the move rook c6 is made possible. So too, reverting to diagram 77 discussed previously, after the advance of the white h-pawn and so on, the sixth rank was condensed into the concrete point g6. This particular illustration was discussed in the last part, that is part 19 of this video series, starting around the 1 minute and 50 seconds mark. So you may roll back to it if you would like to go through it again. Nimzowitsch gives another example of materialization of a file from an exhibition game between Jose Raul Capablanca versus R. Lopez Martinez, played in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1914. Capablanca needs no introduction. However, the black player Martinez was likely an amateur player, since I could not find significant information relevant to this player on the internet. Nimzowitsch writes, in the position shown on board, in which white commands the f file and black tries to defend their first and second ranks, Capablanca won almost automatically by the mere dead weight of the file. Rook f1, rook e8, e4, queen b5, and rook a1. White takes his time. The f file must in the end crush the opposition by its own weight. Queen d7, c4, rook f7, rook takes on f7, queen takes on f7, rook f1, queen g7, rook f5, rook f8, and a queen g5, winning a pawn. Queen h8, queen takes on h5, queen takes on h5, rook takes on h5, rook f3, king g2, rook takes on b3, rook f5, and black resigned, since the h pawn could not be stopped. For example, rook b2 check, rook f2, and so on. The moral application of this for the student may be thus formulated. If in the end game a file is in your permanent position, do not worry about an eventual breaking through point. This will come of itself, almost without any assistance on your part. We will now give a few endgames exemplifying the 4 elements of endgame strategy. The first of which is from a game between Aron Nimzowitsch versus Rudolf Spielmann. The game was played in 1912 in the San Sebastian tournament in San Sebastian, Spain. Nimzowitsch writes, first example, in the position on board with bishop f5, knight takes on d4, bishop takes on c8, rook takes on c8, c takes on d4, castling, d takes on e5, f takes on e5, queen takes on d5 check, queen f7, queen takes on f7 check, rook takes on f7, and bishop takes on e5. White passed into the endgame, for which he has to the good a temporary pawn majority, and more particularly a bishop permanently posted in the center. There followed a rook f5, f4, rook takes on h5, rook b1, and bishop e7. Spielmann defends himself with his customary ingenuity. King f2, progressive centralization. b6, king f3, rook h6, rook d1, rook c4, rook d7, king f7, a5, b5, rook e1, rook c6, bishop d4, rook e6, rook h1, h6, rook b7, rook d6, bishop e5, rook e6, and king e4. After preparatory rook maneuvers, notice that the rook at b7 is in close contact with the protected point b6, and that the 7th rank is to be materialized. The black rooks prove themselves to be passive enough actually to invite a further advance of the white king. Bishop, king, and pawn now form a central island. The bishop is the bridge builder. The point e4 is our shelter. Rook c4 check, king f5, rook c5, rook d1, b4, rook d8, rook takes on a5, rook f8 check, king takes on f8, king takes on e6, and black resigns. The second endgame illustration is from a game between George Allen Thomas versus Aron Nimzowitsch. Sir George Allen Thomas, 7th Baronet, was a British badminton, tennis, and chess player prominently in the first half of the 20th century. He was British chess champion in 1923 and 1934 and has wins to his credit against top players of the time including Capablanca, Emanuel Lasker, and Mikhail Botvinnik. The game was played in 1912 in the Marienbad tournament in MATERIALIZATION. I hope I pronounced that correctly, which is present-day Czech Republic. Nimzowitsch writes, the second example again shows a centralizing maneuver. Consider the position on board. In his difficult situation, black tried king f7. There followed rook e1. The right move was g4, but rook e1 was played in the game. King e7, bishop c3, knight d5, and after the further moves, rook takes on f8, king takes on f8, and bishop e5. The second player has overcome the worst of his difficulties. b5, bishop d3, knight f6, king f1, king e7, and now Sir George could not resist any longer the temptation to win back the pawn and played bishop takes on f6 check, g takes on f6, and rook takes on e4. Further, since after e5 he exposed his rook by rook h4, black got the upper hand and by forceful centralization won as follows. Bishop f5, king e2, bishop g6, bishop d5, rook b8, c3, f5, bishop d3, and king f6. Observe the collective advance of black's central forces. Bishop c2, a5, played because white's majority on this side is really a minority, or if you will, a majority forsaken by all its patron saints, king and rook. Rook h3, e4, rook h4, b4, a takes on b4, A takes on b4, rook f4, king e5 stops the whole. Rook f1, b3, bishop d1, f4, king e1, bishop f7, g3 and f3. White is all sewn up. There followed the sacrifice. Bishop takes on f3, e takes on f3, rook takes on f3, and after a stubborn fight, black won through his superiority in material. The third endgame illustration is from a game between Alfred Earhart Post versus Alexander Alekhine. Alekhine needs no introduction. Alfred Earhart Post was a German chess master and functionary with his playing career spanning the early 20th century. The game was played in 1914 in the Mannheim tournament in Mannheim, Germany. The tournament did not finish due to outbreak of World War I. Nimzowitsch writes, the third example, an ending rich in combinations. The gifted, imaginative Franco-Russian seems in this game to wish to sweep away the rules of my system with a hurricane of his seething inspiration. This, however, is only apparently the case. In reality, everything is done in the spirit of the system and of centralization. Consider the position on board. g4 check. The candidate pawn on f5 stays behind. But we are here concerned with a sacrificial combination. King g2. If instead king f4, then king f6 with mating threats. As such, king g2, king f7, knight takes on f6, rook e1, h4, king g6, knight b4 and f4. This is the winning idea. G takes on f4, rook g1 check, king h2, g3 check, king h3 and bishop f2. Now pawn, bishop and rook are united into one whole, but this whole has at any rate for the moment small possibility of expansion. King g4. The threat was rook h1 check, king g4, rook takes on h4 check. So king g4, rook h1, f5 check, king f6, knight d5 check, king e5, king f3, king takes on f5, knight takes on c7, rook h4 and knight takes on b5. Black has given up his whole queenside. With what justification? Well, because with the fall of white's h-pawn, the capacity for expansion, which was somewhat lacking before, as mentioned previously, is now present in rich measure. The two united passed pawns, with the king there to stop the holes, demolish all resistance. Rook f4 check, king g2, h5, rook d8, h4 and rook f8 check. The white rook wants to stop the combined attack. King g5 and rook g8 check. If rook takes on f4, king takes on f4 followed by king g4. As such, rook g8 check, king h5, rook h8 check, king g6 and rook e8 in order after bishop c5 to safeguard his base, which would be threatened by rook f2 check, bishop c5, rook e2 and king f5. The whole stopper draws near. b4, bishop b6, king h3, rook f2, knight d6 check, king f4, rook e4 check, king f3, king takes on h4, bishop d8 check, king h5, rook h2 check and king g6. The white pieces are all away. The house stands deserted and desolate. g2 and white resigns. The fourth endgame illustration is from a game between Eric Cohen versus Aron Nimzowitsch. Cohen was a German chess master who played around the turn of the 20th century. The game was played in 1906 in the Altmünchen Club tournament in Munich, Germany. Nimzowitsch writes, as the fourth example, let us follow a king in his wanderings, which interests us in as much as they take place under the watchful eye of a centrally placed queen. Consider the position on board. The game proceeded queen e5, queen d1 check, king f2 and queen d5, the fight for the midpoint of the board, queen f4 check and king g6, beginning of the wandering. Queen f5 is now threatened. King e1, queen f5, queen g3 check, king h5, queen g7 and queen e4. The black king is preparing to go either to h2 or e4. Queen f7 check, king g4, queen g7 check, queen g6, queen d7 check, king f3, queen h3 check and king e4 are ideal frontal position. King e2 and king e5. After the king has gone to great pains and trouble to get to the point e4, he retires with the threat queen c2 check. This is the point of the maneuver, namely to get time for the move c4, which forces the white queen perpetually to protect the point d3. How the black king, in order to be free of checks, now flees to e7 and the queenside pawns carry out their irresistible advance is as interesting as it is instructive. King d2, c4, queen f1, queen e4, queen e2, king d6, queen f1, king e7, queen e2, b5, queen f1, a5, queen g1, queen e5, king c2, b4, queen f2, queen e4 check, king c1, a4, queen g3, b3, a takes on b3, c takes on b3, queen c7 check, king e6, queen c8 check, king d5, queen d7 check, king c4, queen f7 check, king d3 and white resigns. Alright, we conclude this part of Aron Nimzowitsch My System here, where this chapter, the elements of endgame strategy, also concludes. In the next part, we shall begin chapter 7, the pin. Shout out to Olipals for gifting a sub to a viewer on my Twitch stream 2 weeks ago. Distant 187 aka Sith with a gifted sub. Parmenides1 for continuing his tier 2 sub. Mainstreampepe, rreyv, Bishop in the Corner Pocket, Lord Blizzard, fellow streamer and YouTuber Skewrly aka Derek, and fellow streamer Nicola Stoyson for continuing their subs. emptywavefunction, the top cheerer with an amazing 7,300 bits. Thank you so much for the kind support, Empty. Nicola Stoyson at second with 1,000 bits. Lord Blizzard at third with 505 bits. Skewrly and fellow streamer Eschelius at fourth with 300 bits. Eschelius is a strong player from Finland and streams chess occasionally as well. Do check out his stream. I will post a link to it in the video description. Fellow streamer CL Smith at 5th with 200 bits. F-Pawn at 6th with 110 bits. RockyMtnChess at 7th with 50 bits. Goke09 at 8th with 2 bits. And then amazing anonymous support with 16,500 bits last week as well. Thanks a lot for the awesome support, everyone. Much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care and stay safe.